We are Team 5, and we're gonna do a presentation. This spreadsheet will assess if opening a Dunkin' Donuts franchise is financially successful and viable. And our teammates are Katrina, Jacob, Nolan, and me, Mariana. So a little bit of history about Dunkin' is Bill Rosenberg opened Kettle in 1948, a restaurant selling donuts and coffee in Quincy, Massachusetts, but he changed the name in 1950 to Dunkin' Donuts after discussing with company executives. He conceived the idea for the restaurant after his experiences selling food in factories and at construction sites, where donuts and coffee were the two most popular items. The restaurant was successful, and Rosenberg sold franchises to others starting in 1955.
I'm curious if you know, because I love the history of trademarks. Was the apostrophe instead of the G always there? Is that how you started it? Do you know? I wonder how their trademark has changed over time.
I think with previous research, it's always started with the apostrophe.
Yeah, and then company snapshot. Dunkin' is the world's leading baked goods and coffee chain, serving more than 3 million customers each and every day. True to our name, we offer 50 plus varieties of donuts, but you can also enjoy dozens of premium beverages, bagels, breakfast sandwiches, and other baked goods. So we went from coffee beans to jelly filling. Everything we do is about you, from chefs who create exciting new flavors to crew members who know exactly how customers want their drink. Dunkin' prioritizes what customers need to get them and their way, and they strive to do their best and remain loyal to customers, tastes, and time.
So now we will be moving on to our assumptions. So here we have our assumptions broken down. It was a little challenging to find kind of like the base case, best case, and worst case annual sales for Dunkin'. We settled on 1 million as the base case because everything with our assumptions is that we have the average of everything, including the startup costs and operating costs. With the startup costs, we found that in the Central Texas area, we're going to have 40,000 as our franchise fee. And looking through the franchise disclosure document for Dunkin' Donuts, we made sure for each of the startup costs to find the average of each of those costs, from real estate development all the way to the marketing startup fee. We also, for the operating costs, we did a lot of research for our specific Dunkin' Donuts that we were planning on opening. We had to be very specific since there are a bunch of varieties of Dunkin' Donuts. We decided for ours, we are going to have just a freestanding franchise. It's going to include a, a delivery window where customers can come up and grab coffee on the go. That would be included in the restaurant technology system as well too. And we also included that along with the rent, utilities, and maintenance costs. We actually looked up the fees that you would pay with rent, utilities, and maintenance in San Antonio. We looked at all the different documents for kind of like state laws in Texas, specifically for San Antonio. And then moving on with our other assumptions, we made sure to put the total startup costs, total operating costs up on the top. We also found some different kind of like with general manager and then salaries per part-time employee. We did some research on that. With general manager, we found an open job description for a general manager. Their average was 46,700. And personally, I had a friend whose little brother works at a Dunkin' Donuts franchise in the Stone Oak area. And so I interviewed his little brother to see how many average employees there are and the total amount or the average amount he earns per hour, which is part-time, 24 hours a week. So that averages out to 18,200 per year. We also decided that 13 part-time employees would be suitable for our Dunkin' Donuts franchise. If we decided to be open 24 hours a day, we would always ensure for the part-time period, we would always have at least 3 employees in the given time period, 24 hours a day. And then we also have our WAC as well too, which would be 5% per Professor Sweet's suggestion. And our payback period would be 9 periods.
Okay, so let me understand. I'm gonna probably ask questions as we go. So
Yes.
there's some real estate development that I assume I'm paying to some strip mall, or if it's a standalone building, but I'm paying rent, so I don't own the real estate. It doesn't sound like. Am I paying that to Duncan Donuts the way McDonald's does it, or am I renting from some other real estate company?
We would be renting from another real estate company.
All right, so they're gonna lease out their building. You said standalone, but does that standalone means it's not in a mall, but it could be in a strip mall, right? Or it's not, or
Yeah,
it's not
it
a
could be
gas station.
not in a gas station.
Yeah, I think most Dunkin' Donuts are kind of in a outside strip mall, right? That's pretty normal. So you're
Yes.
paying them 31,000. Okay, so I don't own the real estate, but I do own I'm spending $250,000 in the equipment. Is that my equipment now? Would you know if I decided this doesn't work out 2 years later, could I resell that equipment, or is that somebody else's?
For the equipment, I believe that specifically would be under Dunkin' Donuts.
So I'm paying them kind of a fee to get it to me, right?
Yes.
We'll see when we talk about your worst case. We'll see. I'm always thinking about this. Would I do this? We saw the McDonald's case getting ready for its presentation on Friday. They've got me a little scared. This is a little bit cheaper franchise. So one of my concerns is if it doesn't work out, what happens if I get out? So when we get to the worst case, maybe y'all can think through that. So, okay, I think I understand the assumptions. Okay.
Okay. So the next space we're going to be talking about is all our cases, being our base, our best, our worst, and our break even. So let me go ahead and zoom out here. So we have our benefits and our costs along with the summarizations for net cash flow. In the case of the base case, we're referring back to the assumption for the annual sales. That's what we've went ahead and used for our benefits change. So in this beginning one, in base case, we have a base of total revenue. However, we did also factor in the percentage of capacity as the idea of the restaurant or, the coffee place becoming more popular over time in the area. In the first couple of years, it wouldn't be as popular as over time for it to grow. So our legitimate revenue forecast to start for $1 million actually is multiplied by 65% to showcase a different forecast until full knowing where our total revenue will just equal out our revenue forecast at 100% capacity. After that, we have our costs here with our opening costs, which are the same across the board, since we are basing with the total revenue realistically and seeing how much we can bring into the location. COGS is a percentage of the revenue as well, to get the different COGS forecasts, royalties as well, since they are flat from the assumptions. And then finally, here's our net cash flow. In this case, we did accept it because it is over 0 and it is a net present value positive, along with the rate of return being much higher than our 5% WAC. And with a base case of just 1 million sales, paying it back in a little under 4 years. From there, we have our best case, where we realistically, the only change was the total revenue number here, increasing with the percentage of increase over time, also giving us a higher net present value and a higher rate of return based on our WAC, along with a lower discounted payback, which is one of the big benefits as well, almost paying back almost close to a year earlier. After that, we also have our worst case. Here's where we change it to our lower forecast in total revenue sales. This is based off of the worst case assumption here that we had, along with all our different revenue forecasts based on capacity along with it. In this case, we still would actually accept with the net present value, It seems that even with lower than forecasted sales for Duncan Donuts, it seems that it's fairly popular enough to where it's still considerably successful in a net present value. The discounted payback is actually the highest impacted out of all of them, besides just the rate of return, almost increasing the amount to payback by another increased 2 years. We are still waiting to accept that with our payback cutoff of 9 years, but it definitely does increase the amount of time, especially other intangible costs that might come along, such as anything with breakdown with equipment or replacements or any other kind of additional fees as well. And then finally, our break even, which was as a result from a goal seek in terms of the percent of the base case revenue, with about 73% of the base case revenue needing to be just to break even. So that would be about 732,839 in sales with the current percent of capacity.
I go back to the base case because there's one thing I'm not understanding in your spreadsheet. So there's something strange on the spreadsheet, and I didn't notice it when you are. But if you look at column N, the net cash flows are increasing until year 5, and then they start declining. And I'm wondering why that is. Is it something to do with your labor cost? See, your revenues are going up about 24,000. Your expenses about 21. Yeah, it's kind of strange to me. Why is it? It's kind of bumpy too, and I don't quite understand.
I do believe from when making this that the reason to point that is because of the increasing percentages in the inflation and labor costs. The operating costs also do increase, but the one that is increasing by a large amount is the labor costs. This could be a result of a couple different things besides just the inflation. This could also be influenced by employee turnover as well. If we have more employee turnovers, then it would occur with the idea that the labor costs would actually stabilize at some points. But this is based off of a salary assumption with the 13 part-time employees as if they stuck through us the entire time.
Go back to your assumptions and let's compare your inflation on revenues versus employees, and let's see if it's a big difference. So, okay, because your raise on your employees is 5% and your revenue is going up 2.9. So at some point, if that keeps happening, I can understand, I think we even talked about with all the talk about minimum wage, there is some fear that in salaries, I think at some point, you're going to have to raise your prices if your labor costs go up like that, right? Because you can't just because after that, every year your net cash flow is declining. So it looks like at some point this thing's just going to start declining, go to nowhere unless you increase your prices. So maybe that's a conservatism in your assumptions. You see it in the base best, you see it in all the cases, but you don't notice it the first few years because you're ratcheting up your sales. But yeah, you can't really have a business whose cost. Now is that the only cost that's different?
No, well, the labor cost is definitely like an increase, but the cost of goods sold is based on a percentage of revenue.
Yeah, that's going to go up the same percentage as the revenues. So, and the royalties is percentage of revenue too. So, what about your operating costs and bank service fees? What raise are you using on those?
So the bank service fees are on a 2.5%. These are always based on the bank service fees stay the same across the board. Because
your operating expenses are going to grow at what rate?
Yeah, they're based off of the licenses. Yeah,
right. So you consistently have higher inflation rates for your costs than you do for your revenues. That's a conservatism that eventually we'd have to give, right? Because at some point it no longer makes sense as a business 10 years, 20 years out. And eventually you just raise your prices, which is the argument people make about raising minimum wage. Companies are going to either have to raise their prices or replace labor. So, okay, I just want to understand that. Okay, I see you're being conservative on your inflation numbers. So,
yes.
Okay. All right. I got it.
All right. And then beyond that, we just have our summary table here, just summarizing everything that was said in those cases. here we based it off of our annual sales here, just to put it down along with our break even sales as well. And then here's just all our summarization for what we had seen.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing I was telling you. It still seems too good to be true. So I don't know if any of you are planning on sitting in on the McDonald's one.
I will.
Yeah, go back to the base case, and this is what I want y'all to compare. One of your teams is got something that doesn't, unless Dunkin' Donuts is just a much better franchise. So go back to your base case, and something you might want to look at. If you can click on the base case. So something you might want to look at is the net cash flow as a percentage of the revenue. I think with McDonald's, that net was a little over 10%. It looks like yours, especially in the out years, is about 25%. So you have a much higher. So, that's something you may want to think about, while you're watching theirs is labor costs, a percentage of revenue, operating costs, a percentage of revenue. Try to figure out, what's the main difference in your assumptions. Not that one is right and one is wrong. It's possible both could be right, but it seems you would think these franchises would be competing with each other and have similar. Now, maybe McDonald's is just a much more expensive franchise just because they've got the name recognition, but either theirs is too conservative or yours is too aggressive. We talked about that a lot, right? Try to get what's reasonable, and your net cash flows of 345 sound high versus what I would expect for a franchise like this when you get out to like the 5th year. But I know y'all looked and tried to figure out, what could you be missing? It'd be great. It's tough to actually get a franchise owner to talk to you because they seem to be a little skittish of talking to outside parties. So if your numbers are correct, it looks like a really great, because remember what I said, your worst case is you make a lot of money. And I'm always a little skeptical that the worst thing that's going to happen to you in a franchise, which is a pretty risky thing to do, is that you'll make a lot of money. Okay, interesting. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying I'm always skeptical of really good business plans. So, okay.
Another part that we also might be a reason for that might be the intangibles. There's a couple intangibles that also would probably impact something like that as well.
Well, it's, McDonald's has the advantage of they're pretty busy. Well, maybe not at 2 a.m., but they're pretty busy from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. Dunkin', because they don't serve meals, you go to Dunkin' for coffee for breakfast, and you probably get coffee throughout the day, but they don't have that huge flow throughout the day. So you don't have the turnover that McDonald's has. So that's the disadvantage that Dunkin' doesn't. I know Starbucks tried to start doing like, come by, get your coffee, and we'll give you a sack lunch. And I don't think that worked out very well. I don't think anyone buys donuts at 4 p.m. unless they have some party or something. So, that may be part of the intangibles you can talk about. This is a very specifically during the day type of business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so, go ahead.
You can go ahead, Mari.
You can go ahead, Mari.
Okay. So for intangibles, we have franchise rights and fees. We have location, ordering systems, product freshness, which would be like all the products used for the coffee or donuts, like milk and things like that have expiration dates, product waste, morning versus evening customers, which is what you were mentioning right now, Professor. We have brand standards, young and potentially unprofessional employees, opportunity costs, which would be time and investment, providing jobs for the community. We have Dunkin' is in the bottom 10% of similar sized companies in its ability to retain quality employees. We also have reduced efficiency in decision making. So any decision needs approval from higher management. It also opens early in the mornings because it's because of the customers it brings. So it opens the earliest at 5 in the morning, depending on the location of the store, and this can be difficult for employees. We also have that the common age range for Dunkin' Donuts employees is between 20 and 30 years. So work-life balance is difficult for people at this age. And we also have seasonal product changes, examples like holidays like Christmas and new products that can come along with holidays.
I don't know if any of y'all are management majors, but if you compare like a McDonald's, a Dairy Queen, and Dunkin', I worked at McDonald's for a month. It's pretty easy to train employees at a McDonald's because the lunch and the breakfast and the dinner are cooked almost identically. It's just throwing something on a grill and sticking it in a box. But there are some shakes and things you got to do. Dairy Queen, I think, would be a disaster because you gotta learn so much. I'd hate to be an employee there, have to learn all those different things. I would assume Dunkin', you do all the donuts early in the morning. There's probably a pretty clear process how to do jelly donuts versus other donuts. I don't know what the process is. You have some grease and fire, so you have some hassles there. But from a manager, let's say, I know y'all aren't probably going to be managers at a place like this. You're probably going to be making twice that, but you might start here for experience. What would you consider the training issues of a Dunkin' Donuts? How difficult is this to teach an 18-year-old?
If I could talk about that, I think one of the major kind of like from what I was talking about with my friend's little brother, I think one of the major things that he seemed to have most trouble with is making sure to get down, kind of like making sure to be able to talk to customers about different coffee orders that they may have, because I know they have different ways of doing coffee. Some people may prefer a certain way, or they may have one thing that they might want to change as well too, because it seems like with donuts, you just kind of put them in the oil and then just let them fry for a little bit. But mainly it's with coffee that it seems like most people would have trouble with, because there's usually a set recipe, but sometimes that recipe could change either majorly or in minor ways as well too.
But they do just coffee, or are they doing like smoothies or other things too? Have they tried?
I believe that Dunkin' works with coffee mainly is like one of their biggest selling points, actually, especially because of the branding from where it came from. When I was in Chicago, I know that there was a lot of talk in terms of Dunkin' being like the place to go get coffee. Realistically, in big metropolitan areas like this, Dunkin' is more of just pick up the coffee, go, because it's quick. And realistically, the donut's actually more of a supplement sometimes. Comparatively, in places like San Antonio, it's a little bit more different. There's like new stand-up locations, like one that just built on Blanco Road, that are much more localized. So it's like much more different depending on like the type of city that it's being built in, because here it might become more like a hangout spot, like for the teenagers to like hang out or something like that. Whereas for metropolitan areas, it's I need my coffee, I need to go to my meeting, that's it. Like it's like, so most of the time the coffee ends up being one of our biggest selling points, especially in these big metropolitan areas. So that might make it the difficulty with like a lot of employees who are part-time not being able to keep up with some of these coffee orders, and them being very complicated, making the turnover as high as it is because of this, with situations with like dropped coffee, coffee orders being wrong, complaints, all that kind of stuff.
I would think, the times I go into Dairy Queen, the employees just look completely, every order is like they got to look at a piece of paper to figure it out. Dunkin' can't really compete with Starbucks, but they're a lot more basic than Starbucks. I guess that's an advantage. I think I got a Frosty or something at Dunkin', kind of a milkshake kind of thing. But it sounds like the donuts aren't that big of a deal, so that may be pretty simple. It seems like there's a lot of variety, but they're pretty easy to do. So it's training on the coffee without becoming Starbucks. And I'm amazed with Dunkin' is how dominant they are. When I was up northeast riding my bike, the small cities, Dunkin' was the place. Like you said, the place to be. It wasn't McDonald's, it wasn't Dairy Queen like it is in Texas. It's the Dunkin' Donut, and it is just kind of a hangout place. Yeah, I think employee training, like you mentioned, turnover is a big deal here, and I think the simpler the food, the better. But then you got to attract customers too, so it's always a hassle. Okay.
Well, here we have just pasted some of our helpful info boards from some key statistics that we used to come up with these base cases. including like some key statistics from average ones. This one's using a 15% net profit margin here to showcase some more of it. Here's like the payback period from the average. So, and then finally, here's the reasons to invest.
Yeah. To wrap it up here, Dunkin' Donuts is a established brand. It's worldwide. They've been over here for 70 years, over 10,000 locations worldwide. Investing in like a franchise like Dunkin' Donuts, you have a sense of stability. You know, people always be coming in the mornings, always getting that coffee or that donut. Second potential reason to invest is the profit. We saw in all of our cases we conducted, make some money at the end of the day. And the third one is I was kind of really interested in like this franchising stuff. And I saw on the Dunkin' Donuts website, they have models of how to start your business. You can have the support from Dunkin', from the heads up. So not gonna be by yourself. And that's the 3 reasons why you should invest in a Dunkin' Donuts franchise.
Let's see tomorrow what McDonald's says, because McDonald's is through on the first one, not through on the second one, at least in their case. And definitely they're both very successful franchises. I mean, you're college students. Would any of y'all say, "Hey, I'm going to graduate from college, but I'm not going to go to corporate America. I'm going to get into debt, start a franchise, and I'm going to make it work, and I'll add more franchises"? Would that be a career any of y'all would want to do?
Maybe when I'm older.
I've thought about it. I honestly, from like this studying and just in general, like looking at new franchises, I've thought about it because I've worked for like franchises like Domino's. Domino's is also a pretty big franchise, but it's really exclusive sometimes. And when they do franchise, it's like a really big like family of like stores. Like the one here in San Antonio is Team Murph, and they're big. Like they got so many locations. I remember when I was also in Houston and Arlington when I worked at Domino's, that they are also massive. Like they have like crazy events and like buildings in like the DFW area at the top floor, and it's just it's crazy. Like there are so many people that are owning these, and they're making a ton of a killing in that way.
Well, and I think that's part of the reason I'm skeptical on your base case, because most franchises I know, they own 5 to 10 of these, and they make 75 to 150 on each one. So any given one's not enough to really live off of. It'd be kind of okay, but it's a lot of hassle. And y'all got them up almost 2 to 3 times that at 300 and something thousand. So it sounds too good, but comparing it, and that's the thing. Chick-fil-A, I think the team in that case looked even better, but the problem there is you can't get a Chick-fil-A franchise because they're even more exclusive. Dunkin', Subway was the big one, and then they built too many Subways. So is it possible they built too many Dunkins, and how well do they control that? Chick-fil-A, McDonald's control that very, very carefully so that franchises don't compete with each other. I don't know about Domino's, since it's home delivery, you got to be real careful on that one. I haven't noticed, you said 10,000, that's a lot. That sounds like more than McDonald's maybe. That's a lot of buildings, but they're smaller. They're not quite as, you can have a few more Dunkins than McDonald's probably. So,
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Streets, yeah.
I mean, it's a great case if your numbers are correct. You just know I'm skeptical, but we should be skeptical of all numbers that look good anytime someone's proposing. So the question is always, what might we missing? If let's say someone said, and I'm not saying this is true, but someone comes and said, "Hey, I looked at your model and there was one major thing you got wrong, and that's why your numbers look so rosy." What would you guess might be the thing? Would it be revenues too high, labor's too low, op costs too low?
To be honest, I'm not so sure if our revenue is good, because we're not too sure if all the research we've been pointing to for the revenue is just a Dunkin' Donut in one particular area, or just in general, it's just a generalized range. But that's the only thing that I think we're unsure about, because with our labor costs and all our operating costs, those are all just averages from the disclosure document. But other than that, the revenue, we can see how that might be a little too high.
The difference might also be because of the different type of Dunkins. Because like a McDonald's, it's like freestanding or in a mall, like most of the time. And it's not like there's like a mini McDonald's that only gives you like a Big Mac or something like that. But like Dunkin' Donuts can have like that kind of flexibility. But in terms of having much more smaller locations and smaller areas, there's also the fabled double franchise, when it's two restaurants right next to each other that take up the one building. I've seen Dunkin's like that as well. So realistically, I think it's because it's taking the averages from all of these. So maybe a further research would be studying every single specific different kind. So maybe every freestanding Dunkin' Donuts, every mall Dunkin' Donuts, and just making base cases, best cases, and worst cases for all these different ones to see if there's one that's pulling down and which one might be pulling up the average.
You definitely want to drive through on Dunkin', which if you're in a strip mall, you're going to have to be on the corner. A quick Google, and I think we did a Google search. The $1 million sounds pretty consistent. So the big issue is column N. The first 2 years look okay, 108, 137, but that's because you're still ratcheting up. It's when you get out to those future years at 345, that's about 2 to 3 times. But you did double check on the labor costs, so maybe there's some major operating costs you're just leaving out. So, and that's the kind of thing where before I ever did a franchise like this, I would go to another city and find a franchise owner who would talk to me, and it'd be another city, so they wouldn't worry about me competing with them. So I might go to Arizona or someplace and talk to Dunkin' Donuts owner and say, "Hey, I live in San Antonio. You don't have to worry about me, but I'll pay you $100 if you'll sit down and go," or whatever. I'd be willing to pay them for their time. Go in detail exactly what this wouldn't you want that? I mean, you want to make sure you got these numbers down, and talking to a franchise owner would probably be the best to do.
Yes.
So. All right. It's good. All right. Any questions from, let's see, we got Emmanuel, Natalie, and Laisha. We got the team from yesterday in here. Y'all have questions?
I have a question. My question was, if you're opening up Dunkin's franchise with, I know usually they attach Baskin Robbins in them sometimes, when you do not know, you pay royalties to Dunkin' for opening a franchise. If you open a franchise with both of them, do you have to have, I guess, double the loyalty cost or more labor? Does it include more labor in that or no?
May I answer that? So I definitely say that if you have double, it definitely has a lot more fees along with that as well too, because that's kind of like, it's two separate brands, right? Even though it is technically the same kind of like, I guess, building, it is two different brands that you have to consider for and two different products. So in a way that would be kind of like up or raised in that sense. Since you also have to consider if they're going to be operating at the same time as well too, you would have to have more employees that would operate that Baskin Robbins side. So the royalties and the labor costs and all the operating costs would rise along with that as well too.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I've seen where the franchise is owned by the same corporation. So like a Taco Bell and a KFC, and they combine, there's probably some efficiencies there. I think that combined smell is horrendous. KFC plus Taco Bell, there are two smells that are pretty unique. And when you combine them, it's just, to me, it's nauseating. So I don't think it works from an aesthetic standpoint, but there probably is some advantage. But yeah, if there are two different franchises sharing, different corporations sharing the same space, there's probably some efficiencies, but there's probably some duplicate costs as well.
That makes sense. Do you know if Dunkin' doesn't own Baskin, do they? Or does Baskin own Dunkin'? I have no idea.
I will do a quick Google search.
Yeah, because if they're able to join in one building, I would assume they're associated in some way. I mean, T-Mobile had to buy Sprint before they could put their name into their title. So,
And the reason you do that is if you got a group of people, you got some kids who want ice cream, you got adults who want coffee, so you're trying to pick up more traffic.
gotcha.
I'm curious if that really works. You know, usually these fast foods are all lumped together anyway, so it's pretty easy to just run different places. That's why I've never understood the KFC Taco Bell. It just doesn't. I don't see how that, but it might. You know, that's what you got to do. Is you got to. Some of y'all are marketing majors. You got to do that market research to see if that actually is going to pick up more customers. You got more choices, but yeah, do you really want more choices if it complicates it for the employees? Creates some strange combination of smells and other things, and it's just complicated, right? Because you got to cook two different things on the same equipment. But yeah, I mean, it's an intriguing question.
Yeah, so I did look it up. So Baskin Robbins and Dunkin' Donuts, while their own separate brands, are actually both owned under a incorporation called Dunkin' Brands. And it's a part of Allied Domecq, which is it was then purchased though in 2006 by a couple private equity firms, Bain Capital, Thomas H. Lee Partners, and the Carlyle Group. So it's all owned in one entity. So maybe when it comes down to branding, since they're both similar in terms of these sweet kind of like brands, you know, Dunkin' Donut, you think of a donut, Baskin Robbins, you're thinking of ice cream. They kind of like blend into like this sweet kind of feeling. And so that's why they're able to make maybe these double franchises, because a lot of the equipment might be similar as well.
Well, yeah, no, that makes more sense. Yeah, that makes it's probably easier for the company to do that since they already own the brand.
Mhm.
Right.
Are there any
Questions, Aisha, Natalie?
No questions from me.
No questions from me either, but I just want to say I really like the colors y'all used. It's really nice.
Thanks.
I'm surprised you found them that close. You probably had to look at a Dunkin' Donut cup while you're looking at it.
Oh yeah. I made sure to use the color palette straight from their logo.
Yeah, no, that's great. All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.